Hello, my name is Mackie, and welcome to another edition of 60 Super Bowls in 60 Days. We are in the Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego, California. It is Super Bowl 37, January 26, 2003, between the Oakland Raiders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I will give you about 5 seconds to tell me what is the common denominator between these two teams facing off in these Super Bowls. Well, here is the answer. It's the coach. Yeah, it's their coach. Jon Gruden used to be an Oakland Raider coach a couple of years ago, back when the Oakland Raiders were a hostile environment, decent team, and of course, the famous black hole that was so synonymous with the Oakland Arena, of course, or the Oakland Coliseum. He was a coach there. But in a weird circumstances that has never been done in any NFL terms or anything ever again, the Oakland Raiders decided to trade a couple of players for draft picks, which is like the norm, of course, and their coach. The Oakland Raiders literally traded their coach to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like if this happened in like the modern day NFL, your brain would have been melted. And this was in 2003. Social media was not even the norm back then. But if that happens in today's social media, your brain would be melted. Adam Schefter would have his phone being on a heater for like the entire day, of course. So for this to happen, it's mind-boggling. But you're thinking to yourself, if you're Oakland Raiders, there's no way you're going to see your former coach in a Super Bowl with him trying to like outfigure out your schemes and all kinds of stuff. Oh, wait a minute, you did. Yeah, you did. The Raiders and the Buccaneers made it a Super Bowl, and Jon Gruden was in the middle of all of this. This was, of course, called the Gruden Bowl for a reason. And Gruden schemed up against the Oakland Raiders and bit them in the butt. 48-21 as your final score. Tampa Bay won their first Super Bowl, and let me remind you that this is Tampa Bay's first Super Bowl ever. Consider that a couple of years ago, the very first couple of years in Buccaneers football, with their crimsicles and their pirate logo with a little sword in their teeth, everybody knows the logo, of course, they were dreadful. They were absolutely dreadful back then. Bad ownership, bad play. They had Doug Williams, by the way. Yeah, they had Doug Williams a couple of years ago before he moved to Washington and then balled out in that Super Bowl, of course. Remember that Super Bowl? Yeah, I think you did. The breaking barriers thing, which, by the way, gets a couple of numbers, so thank you very much. Yeah, that is bad. So for Buccaneers fan to go do all of this, and win a Super Bowl, and for Jon Gruden to do this against your former employees, it's marvelous. It is absolutely chef's kiss. Let's go to the stats. Rich Gannon, pretty good, decent quarterback. 24-44 for 272 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 picks. That was just brutal. And the reason why those 5 picks are important is because, and I never mentioned an assistant coach throughout all my Super Bowl runs, but Tony Dungy, and he'll be in the big conversation later on in most of my Super Bowl reviews. Tony Dungy implemented the famous Tampa 2 defense, in which you got, I'd just say, like 2 safeties up top, like a couple of linebackers over there, and trying to like limit the space and all kind of stuff. And the Tampa 2 defense was an amazing thing. And when you got defenders, and I know I'm gonna go to defenders left, but when you got defenders like your Dwight Smith, your Dexter Jackson, your Derek Brooks, your Simeon Wrights, your Warren Sapps of the world, then you can do anything. That is like a big deal. So for Tony Dungy to call all the players like that and just mastering the work, it's amazing. And he will not be he will not. This is not the last time you're going to see Tony Dungy coaching a team to win a Super Bowl. In fact, he's the more of the student rather than the master. But he has not elevated yet. That'll be for later on. Anyways, Brad Johnson, 18 of 34 for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns and a reception. For the Russian, Charlie Garner, 7 rushes for 10 yards, 1.43 a pop. Zach Crockett, 2 rushes for 6 yards at 3 a pop. So in terms of rushing, they only got, 16 yards of rushing? 16 yards. The entire game. all 4 quarters. They can't even run the ball to save themselves. And once you can't even run the ball to save yourselves, you're going to rely on this guy to throw a lot of football, and that is not a good sign. When you got to have a guy throwing the ball a lot, 44 times. That's not going to go enough. Anyways, Michael Pittman for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 29 carries for 224 yards at 4.28 a pop. Mike Alstott, 10 carries for 15 yards at 1.5 a pop. And Mike Alstott was kind of like the last great fullbacks, in which back then fullbacks are like bruising, hard earned, one kind of yards. Now you get to see the Kyle Juszczyks of the world and all the kind of stuff, like your bruisers, but also your versatile pass catchers, all kind of stuff. So Mike Alstott is probably the last great fullback back then. And fullbacks are kind of like a dying breed, to be honest. But that's neither here or there. For the receiving, Charlie Gardner, 7 catches for 51 yards at 7.29 a pop. Here's a sight for sore eyes. Jerry Rice. And that's his 40-year-old Jerry Rice, mind you. 5 catches for 77 yards at 15.4 a pop and a touchdown. Because he's Jerry Rice and none of your receivers don't. For a 40-year-old guy to do this, it's amazing. Jerry Porter, not as elite as Jerry Rice, but catch 4 times, 62 yards, 15.5 a pop, and a touchdown. Doug Jolly, 5 catches for 59 yards at 11.8 a pop. Mike Alstott, 5 catches for 43 yards at 8.6 a pop. There's a fullback reference that I mentioned. Keyshawn Johnson, all right, 6 catches for 69 yards, nice. 11.5 yards per catch. Keenan McCarnell, 2 catches for 13 yards at 6.5 a pop with 2 touchdowns. Joe Jurificus, 4 catches for 78 yards at 19.5 a pop. But the defense is where the real story begins. Charles Woodson, we'll get to him later on in more Super Bowl reviews, but Charles Woodson was excellent. Interception, 8 tackles. Eric Barron, 13 tackles and a forced fumble. Bill Romanowski, 10 tackles. Anthony Dorsett, 8 tackles and a fumble recovery. Rod Woodson, 8 tackles. Torrey James, John Porella, 4 tackles. And Chris Cooper / Napoleon Harris, 3 tackles. Sam Adams and Regan Upshaw, 2 tackles. So at least you say that, the Oakland defense did their part. But the Tampa Bay defense was the big story, of course. Dwight Smith, 2 picks, including the 50-yard return interception and 4 tackles. That was the one that kind of sealed the game, of course. I think one of those 2 interceptions would kind of seal the game, but that is here or there. Derek Brooks, also with the game-sealing interception, 44 yards, 3 tackles. And if you notice, the game ended 21-48. If you take away those 2 interception touchdowns, it was what? Like 34-21? It was 34-21 when those 2 interceptions happened. The game was basically over at this point. The 2 interceptions were kind of like icing for the over stats and icing for like the betters, of course, back then in 2003. But that's not here or there. The MVP for this Super Bowl goes to Dexter Jackson with 2 interceptions and a tackle. My God. Like I said, the Tampa Bay 2 defense with Jon Gruden known to the Oakland Raiders team like the back of his hand, pretty much effective. Simeon Rice, 2 tackles, 5 tackles, forced fumble. Greg Spears and Ellen Williams with a sack. And also Warren Sapp as well. Hall of Famer, of course. Brian Kelly, 8 tackles. Shelton Quarry, 7 tackles. Rondy Barber, 4 tackles and a forced fumble. And yes, he is the brother of soon-to-be great football player Tiki Barber. That'll be later on a couple of episodes, of course. For kicking and special teams, Sebastian Janikowski, sorry to botch his name, of course. Yeah, 1 for 1 on field goals. Martin Gramatica Automatica, 6 PATs for 2 for 2 field goals. Total yards, Oakland 269, 365 for Tampa Bay, just at the days of the year. And Oakland Raiders, lots of turnover battle heavy with those 5 interceptions to Tampa Bay's 1. Why the Super Bowl is so important is because of Jon Gruden and Jon Gruden alone. He was, I think, being treated horribly. Not saying horribly, but pretty much treated much like a get out of here, we don't want you kind of person in a trade. And then for him to come back to a different team, build this team up, and then come back and beat them, it's the sweetest revenge ever. I have never seen a Super Bowl in which the door was closed on Jon Gruden, and yet he came back saw the doors open for Tampa Bay, came back and exact revenge on the same team that betrayed him. It is the perfect revenge story for him and a perfect certification to give Tampa Bay their first Super Bowl ever, which is incredible, of course. I think we have never seen a Super Bowl that has revenge factor in it since like the Dan Reeves Super Bowl when Atlanta got crushed by Denver, of course. But if you're gonna do the revenge story, do it right. And for Jon Gruden to do it, it's amazing. So that's the Super Bowl 37 for you guys. Thank you all for watching and all kinds of stuff. We will be doing Super Bowl 38, and this is going to be like the weirdest Super Bowl of all time. Like, in terms of everything weird. The game, the halftime show, the whole thing is weird. It's absolutely weird. So anyways, thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.